The moment you stop chasing someone who keeps running from their own heart, something powerful happens. The silence they once used to protect themselves becomes the mirror they can no longer escape. And in that mirror, they do not just see your absence, they see the truth they have been avoiding. An avoidant person does not always run because they feel nothing. Sometimes they run because they feel too much. They have learned to associate closeness with danger, vulnerability with loss, and love with the possibility of being hurt. So when something real enters their life, something deep, something meaningful, something that touches the places they have kept guarded, they may pull away. But understand this, avoidance can delay truth, but it cannot destroy it. There comes a moment when the distance no longer feels safe. There comes a moment when the silence no longer brings peace. There comes a moment when they realize that pushing away the person who cared for them did not protect their heart. It only created an emptiness they cannot explain. And that is when the confrontation begins. Not necessarily with you first. It begins within them. It begins when they are alone with their thoughts. It begins when they meet new people but cannot recreate the connection they had with you. It begins when they realize that the comfort they were searching for in distance is not actually comfort at all. It is isolation disguised as independence. The greatest force that makes an avoidant confront their true feelings is not pressure. It is not begging. It is not proving your worth again and again. It is the undeniable contrast between the love they experienced with you and the emptiness they feel without it. You see, people often take love for granted when it is constantly available. They assume the person who cares will always remain nearby. They assume the messages will keep coming, the forgiveness will keep flowing, and the door will always stay open. But when you finally choose yourself, when you stop sacrificing your peace to keep someone else comfortable, you create a moment of truth. Your absence becomes information, your boundaries become a message, your self-respect becomes a mirror. And suddenly, the person who avoided emotional closeness must face the question they spent so long trying to escape. What did I lose because I was too afraid to be fully present? That question can shake someone to their core. Because deep down, every human being wants to be seen, understood, accepted, and loved. We may build walls around that desire. We may pretend we do not need anyone. We may call emotional distance freedom, but the soul knows the difference between freedom and fear. Freedom allows you to love without losing yourself. Fear makes you run from love before it can challenge you. And when an avoidant person begins to recognize that difference, their true feelings rise to the surface. Sometimes it happens after a major life event, a loss, a disappointment, a lonely season, a moment when life becomes quiet enough for them to hear the truth they have been drowning out with distractions. Because life has a way of revealing what truly matters. When the noise fades, when the ego gets tired, when the escape routes no longer work, the heart begins to speak, and the heart may remind them of your patience, your presence, your loyalty, your warmth, and the way you made them feel understood. But here is the principle you must remember. Their awakening is not your assignment. Your assignment is not to wait in emotional uncertainty while someone decides whether they're ready to love you. Your assignment is not to abandon your needs so they can avoid facing theirs. Your assignment is to live in truth, walk in dignity, and create a life that does not depend on someone else's emotional availability. Love should never require you to shrink. Love should never demand that you silence your needs. Love should never make you question your worth every day. The right connection does not ask you to chase clarity. It creates clarity. The right love does not punish you for caring. It honors your heart. And when you begin to understand this, you stop trying to force an avoidant person to feel. You stop trying to rescue them from the walls they built. You stop trying to convince them that you are safe. Because the truth is, no amount of love can heal someone who refuses to face themselves. They must choose it. They must choose courage over control. They must choose vulnerability over escape. They must choose growth over the familiar comfort of emotional distance. And if they do, they may finally realize that what they were afraid of was not you. They were afraid of what loving you required them to become. It required honesty. It required responsibility. It required them to stop hiding behind mixed signals, silence, excuses, and emotional withdrawal. It required them to become the kind of person who can receive love without sabotaging it. That transformation is sacred. It is difficult, it is deeply personal, and it cannot be rushed by your anxiety, your hope, or your desire for closure. So release the need to control the outcome. Release the need to decode every silence. Release the need to prove that you are worthy of being chosen. You are worthy because you exist. You are worthy because your heart is capable of love. You are worthy because you are learning to stand in your truth, even when someone else cannot meet you there. The most powerful thing you can do is become so grounded in your own value that you no longer confuse emotional inconsistency with love. You can care for someone and still choose distance. You can understand their wounds and still protect your peace. You can hope they heal and still refuse to lose yourself in their healing process. That is not coldness. That is wisdom. And sometimes that wisdom is exactly what forces the avoidant person to finally confront their true feelings. Not because you punished them, not because you manipulated them, but because you stopped participating in a cycle that allowed them to avoid the truth. Your growth becomes their mirror, your boundaries become their wake-up call. Your peace becomes the evidence that love does not have to be chaotic to be real. And whether they return transformed or remain distant, you win when you choose yourself. Because the purpose of love is not to make you beg for a place in someone's heart. The purpose of love is to help you become more honest, more courageous, more whole, and more aligned with the life you were created to live. Trust that what is meant for you will not require you to betray yourself to keep it. Trust that divine timing reveals what fear tries to hide. Trust that the love you deserve will meet you with clarity, consistency, and courage. And above all, remember this. The person who is truly meant to walk beside you will not only feel your value when you leave, they will honor your value while you are still there. There is a point in every emotionally distant person's journey where the protection they once depended on begins to feel like a prison. At first, pulling away may feel safe. Silence may feel easier than honesty. Distance may feel more comfortable than allowing someone close enough to see their fears, their wounds, and the parts of themselves they have spent years trying to hide. But eventually, the very walls they built to avoid pain become the reason they feel alone. An avoidant person often believes that independence is the answer to emotional discomfort. They may convince themselves that they do not need anyone too deeply, that relationships are complicated, that closeness always comes with expectations, pressure, or disappointment. So when love begins to become real, when someone starts to matter, when emotional connection reaches beyond the surface, their instinct may be to retreat, not because the connection is meaningless, but because it is meaningful enough to scare them. They may pull away after a beautiful moment. They may become distant after receiving love. They may act confused after feeling close to you. This can be painful for the person who cares, because it creates mixed signals and emotional uncertainty. But for the avoidant person, that withdrawal can feel like control. It can feel like a way to protect themselves from being vulnerable. Yet no one can run from their heart forever. There comes a time when the emotional distance they created begins to cost more than the intimacy they feared. The quiet becomes too quiet. The freedom they thought they wanted starts to feel empty. The space they demanded no longer feels peaceful. It feels lonely. That is when something begins to shift. They may remember the way you made them feel seen. They may think about the conversations they avoided. They may recognize that the person they pushed away was not trying to trap them, control them, or take away their freedom. That person may have simply wanted honesty, consistency, and emotional presence. And suddenly, the fear of losing something real becomes stronger than the fear of letting someone in. This is one of the deepest emotional turning points a person can experience, because now they must face a difficult truth. They were not only protecting themselves from pain, they were also protecting themselves from love. They were not only avoiding disappointment, they were avoiding the possibility of being truly known. Real love requires a person to be present. It asks them to communicate when they would rather disappear. It asks them to stay open when their instinct is to close down. It asks them to take responsibility for their emotions instead of making someone else carry the burden of guessing what they feel. For someone who has spent years avoiding emotional vulnerability, this can feel overwhelming. But growth rarely begins in comfort. Growth begins when the old patterns stop working, when the pain of being disconnected becomes greater than the fear of being close. An avoidant person may finally begin to question their behavior. They may start to see that their emotional distance did not truly keep them safe. It only kept them from experiencing the depth of connection they secretly desired. This does not mean they will change overnight. Awareness is the beginning, not the finish line. But once someone realizes that avoidance is costing them love, peace, and meaningful connection, they have an opportunity to choose differently. They can choose courage over escape. They can choose honesty over silence. They can choose emotional responsibility over emotional withdrawal. And that choice can change everything, not only in how they love another person, but in how they finally learn to accept love for themselves. When you are always available to someone, they can begin to mistake your loyalty for something guaranteed. They may assume that no matter how distant they become, no matter how many times they withdraw, no matter how little effort they offer, you will remain there waiting for the smallest sign of attention. This is not because your love has no value. It is because people often fail to recognize value when they have constant access to it. An avoidant person may become comfortable with a pattern where they pull away and you move closer. They create distance and you try to repair it. They become silent and you send another message. They act uncertain and you work harder to prove that you care. Over time, this pattern can teach them that they never have to confront their feelings because your effort keeps the connection alive for them. But the moment you stop chasing, the entire emotional dynamic changes. When you no longer rush to fill every silence, they begin to hear the silence differently. When you stop trying to convince them of your worth, they are left with the reality of what your presence actually meant. When you stop accepting inconsistency, they no longer have the comfort of believing they can keep you close without truly showing up. Your absence is not a game. It is not punishment. It is not manipulation. It is a decision to protect your peace and honor your emotional needs. And that decision can become a powerful mirror. For the first time, they may begin to notice the emotional space you once filled. They may notice that there is no longer someone checking in, encouraging them, making them feel understood, or offering warmth when life becomes difficult. They may realize that your love was not simply attention. It was emotional safety, patience, and genuine care. People often understand the depth of a connection after they no longer have effortless access to it. This is especially true for someone who has been avoiding their own emotions. As long as you are available, they can continue to tell themselves that they are fine, that they do not need more, that the relationship can remain undefined. But when you step back, they can no longer hide behind your consistency. They must face the truth of whether they miss you, whether they value you, and whether they are willing to become emotionally present. Your boundaries force clarity. They reveal whether the person only wanted the comfort of your attention or whether they truly wanted a relationship with you. They reveal whether they are capable of taking responsibility or whether they only return when they fear losing control. They reveal whether their feelings are deep enough to inspire growth. This is why choosing yourself is so important. You cannot make someone recognize your worth by explaining it repeatedly. You cannot force someone to value what they are determined to take for granted. But you can stop offering unlimited access to your heart without mutual care, respect, and consistency. When you reclaim your energy, you also reclaim your power. You begin to invest in your own life, your own purpose, your own healing, and your own future. You stop measuring your value by someone else's emotional availability. You stop waiting for a message to determine whether your day feels good or painful. You stop giving another person the authority to decide whether you are worthy of love. And that is when your energy changes. You become less focused on being chosen and more focused on choosing what is healthy for you. You become less interested in chasing someone's potential and more committed to honoring your own reality. You become someone who can love deeply without abandoning yourself. If an avoidant person truly values you, this shift can wake them up. They may realize that your presence was never something they were entitled to. They may finally understand that love is not sustained by convenience. It is sustained by courage, communication, and consistent action. And if they do not recognize it, your boundaries still protect you from remaining in a direction where you are the only one carrying the emotional weight. Sometimes a person can avoid their feelings for a long time because life gives them enough distractions to keep running. Work becomes the escape. Social media becomes the escape. Casual conversations, temporary connections, endless routines, and constant noise become ways to avoid sitting with what is real. An avoidant person may convince themselves that they have moved on simply because they have stayed busy. They may believe they are fine because they have not allowed themselves to feel deeply enough to admit what they lost. But life has a way of interrupting avoidance. A meaningful life event can suddenly bring a person face to face with the emotions they have been trying to suppress. It may be a loss that reminds them how fragile life is. It may be a personal failure that makes them question the choices they have made. It may be a lonely season when the people around them cannot provide the comfort they once received from someone who truly understood them. It may be a milestone, a birthday, a holiday, a difficult night, or a moment of silence that exposes the difference between being surrounded by people and feeling genuinely connected. In those moments, the heart becomes louder than the mind. The avoidant person may remember the person they pushed away. They may remember the conversations they never finished, the affection they did not know how to receive, the apologies they never gave, and the emotions they buried beneath distance. They may begin to realize that their decision to withdraw was not always based on a lack of love. Sometimes it was based on fear, emotional confusion, or an inability to handle the depth of what they felt. A major life event can remove the illusion of control. When everything is going well, it is easy for someone to believe they do not need emotional closeness. It is easy to say, "I am fine on my own," when life is comfortable and predictable. But when life becomes uncertain, when pain arrives unexpectedly, or when they face something that cannot be solved through logic alone, they may begin to understand the value of emotional support. They may think about who made them feel safe. They may think about who listened without judgment. They may think about who saw beyond their walls and still cared. This does not mean every avoidant person will immediately return, confess their feelings, or become emotionally available. Some people still need time to process what they feel. Some may feel ashamed about the way they handled the relationship. Some may fear that they have waited too long. Others may recognize their feelings but still struggle to express them. But the internal shift can still begin. A difficult life moment can make them realize that emotional connection is not weakness. It is not dependence. It is not something to be avoided. It is one of the deepest human needs. We are not meant to go through every challenge alone, pretending that strength means never needing support. True strength is the ability to be honest. True strength is the willingness to admit, "I miss you." True strength is recognizing that love is not something to run from when it becomes meaningful. For the person who cared for them, it is important to remember that their awakening may come after you have already chosen to move forward. You cannot pause your life waiting for a crisis to make someone understand your value. You cannot sacrifice your peace hoping that one day they will finally realize what they had. Their life event may open their eyes, but their actions must reveal whether they are ready to grow. If they come back with genuine accountability, emotional honesty, and consistent effort, there may be space for a new kind of connection. But if they return only because they are lonely, overwhelmed, or temporarily afraid, the old pattern may repeat. A real transformation is not proven by emotional words in a difficult moment. It is proven by sustained behavior after the moment passes. So allow life to teach people what they need to learn. Allow their journey to be their responsibility. You can have compassion for their pain without becoming responsible for rescuing them from it. You can understand their fear without allowing it to keep you trapped in uncertainty. Sometimes life events awaken the heart, but only courage can turn that awakening into change. Your boundaries are not walls built to punish someone. They are standards built to protect what is sacred within you. They are the quiet declaration that your heart deserves respect, your time deserves consideration, and your love deserves to be met with honesty. When you set a boundary with an avoidant person, you are not trying to force them to change. You are simply refusing to keep participating in a pattern that drains you, confuses you, and leaves you carrying the emotional weight alone. Many people hesitate to set boundaries because they fear losing the connection. They worry that if they stop reaching out, stop accepting mixed signals, or stop tolerating emotional distance, the other person may disappear completely. But if a connection can only survive when you abandon your needs, silence your truth, and accept less than you deserve, then it is not a connection built on mutual love. It is a connection built on imbalance. A boundary creates clarity because it changes the conditions of the relationship. It says, I care about you, but I cannot continue in uncertainty. It says, I am open to communication, but I will not chase silence. It says, I want a meaningful connection, but I will not keep accepting emotional inconsistency as if it is normal. These words may feel difficult to say, especially when you deeply care for someone. Yet they are often the most loving words you can speak, not only to yourself, but to the relationship itself. An avoidant person can remain comfortable in distance when there are no consequences for withdrawing. If they know you will always return, always forgive, always wait, and always make excuses for their behavior, they may never feel the need to confront the impact of their choices. They may continue believing that emotional avoidance is harmless because someone else is absorbing the pain it creates. But boundaries remove that illusion. When you stop over-explaining, stop pleading for basic communication, and stop making yourself endlessly available, the avoidant person is faced with a new reality. They can no longer assume that your love will remain accessible regardless of how they behave. They must recognize that relationships require participation. They must see that emotional closeness cannot be built by one person alone. This is where truth becomes impossible to ignore. They may begin to ask themselves why they feel unsettled when you step back. They may wonder why your absence affects them more than they expected. They may realize that they valued the emotional safety you provided, but failed to offer the same safety in return. Your boundary can expose the difference between wanting the comfort of your presence and being build a real relationship with you, and that realization can be uncomfortable. It can bring guilt, regret, fear, or sadness. But discomfort is often the beginning of awareness. A person cannot change what they refuse to acknowledge. When the old pattern no longer works, they are given a choice: continue avoiding intimacy, or become brave enough to face what their avoidance has cost them. Your boundary does not guarantee that they will choose growth. Some people may retreat further because accountability feels too threatening. Some may try to return only when they feel lonely, without making any real changes. Others may blame you for becoming distant because they do not want to face their own role in the emotional disconnection. That is why your boundary must be rooted in self-respect, not in the hope of getting a specific reaction. You do not set a boundary to make them chase you. You set it because you deserve peace. You set it because your emotional health matters. You set it because love should not require you to live in constant confusion, waiting for someone to decide whether they are ready to show up. When you honor your own limits, you teach people how to treat you. You show them that access to your heart is not automatic. It is earned through care, consistency, and emotional responsibility. And whether they rise to meet that standard or choose to remain distant, your boundary keeps you aligned with your worth. Because the right person will not see your standards as rejection. They will see them as an invitation to love you with the honesty and maturity you deserve. An avoidant person may spend years believing that love can be managed through distance. They may think that if they keep their emotions controlled, reveal only part of themselves, and leave before things become too serious, they can avoid being hurt. Control becomes their shield. They decide how much to share, when to respond, how close someone is allowed to get, and when to disappear. From the outside, it may look like confidence or independence, but beneath that control is often fear, the fear of being rejected, disappointed, dependent, or truly seen. Eventually, real feelings create a conflict that control cannot solve. When someone matters deeply, emotional distance stops feeling simple. They may try to convince themselves that they do not care, but memories continue to return. They may try to stay busy, but certain moments remind them of you. They may try to replace the connection, but they discover that not every person reaches the same place in their heart. The more they try to control what they feel, the more they may realize that the heart does not always obey the rules created by fear. This is where courage becomes necessary. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is the decision to act with truth even while fear is present. For an avoidant person, courage may mean sending the message they have been avoiding. It may mean admitting that they miss you. It may mean apologizing without making excuses. It may mean staying in a difficult conversation instead of shutting down. It may mean saying, I do not know how to do this perfectly, but I do not want to keep running from what I feel. That kind of honesty can feel terrifying for someone who has built their identity around emotional self-protection. But it is also the doorway to real connection. Love cannot grow where one person is always hiding. It cannot thrive where silence replaces communication. It cannot become secure when one person is constantly trying to guess what the other person feels. A meaningful relationship requires two people who are willing to be seen, even when being seen feels uncomfortable. This does not mean a person must have every answer before they are ready to love. No one enters a relationship completely healed, completely fearless, or completely certain. But emotional maturity means taking responsibility for your fears instead of making someone else suffer because of them. It means recognizing that your past may explain your patterns, but it does not give you permission to repeat those patterns without accountability. When an avoidant person finally understands this, they may begin to see that love is not asking them to lose their freedom. It is asking them to use their freedom with integrity. They are free to communicate. They are free to be honest. They are free to choose commitment. They are free to stop treating closeness like a threat. Real love does not imprison a person. It expands them. It teaches them that vulnerability is not weakness. It teaches them that being emotionally available does not mean surrendering their identity. It teaches them that asking for reassurance, expressing needs, and admitting fear are not signs of failure. They are signs of humanity. The person who truly wants to grow will eventually understand that control may protect them from temporary discomfort, but it can also keep them from the very connection they desire. They will realize that avoiding emotional risk may prevent rejection, but it also prevents intimacy. They will see that every time they run from a difficult feeling, they run from an opportunity to build something deeper. For the person waiting on them, this is where discernment becomes important. You can appreciate someone's courage without accepting half-hearted effort. You can respect their healing process without allowing their fear to become your emotional burden. You can welcome honesty, but you should also look for consistency. Words can open the door, but actions prove who is willing to walk through it. If they truly confront their feelings, they will not only speak about love when they fear losing you. They will show it through presence, accountability, patience, and a willingness to stay engaged when life becomes emotionally challenging. They will choose courage again and again, not just once. Because love is not sustained by controlling every outcome. Love is sustained by trusting enough to be real, brave enough to be vulnerable, and mature enough to remain present when the heart asks you to grow. Thank you for being here and choosing growth, truth, and self-respect in your journey. Goodbye for now. Keep honoring your heart, protecting your peace, and trusting the love that meets you with courage.